Two combined arms armies of the Russian Federation are simultaneously pushing in the Huljajpole direction, attempting to reach Orichiw from the east and link up with the 58th Combined Arms Army in order to continue moving together towards Saporischschja. However, the enemy has lost the initiative due to local counterattacks by the armed forces of Ukraine and is forced to get drawn into defensive battles along the entire section of the front. Currently, the enemy is operating in this sector with the 5th Combined Arms Army. This consists of 5 regiments and 3 brigades, as well as 2 attached brigades from the 35th Combined Arms Army and regiments from the 76th Air Assault Division and the 40th Separate Naval Infantry Brigade of the Russian Federation. The enemy is trying to infiltrate our interpositional space in small groups of up to 4 and up to 8 men. Despite, let's say, rather slow rates of movement, particularly in the Huljajpole direction, the enemy managed to advance somewhat along the general sector, up to 10 kilometers. And thanks, actually, only to constant KAB bombings and the use of unmanned aerial vehicles. Right now, the 5th Combined Arms Army is advancing in this direction. We see general trends from Huljajpole to Ternavade. So, in fact, this section belongs to the 5th Combined Arms Army, which is trying, from the east, to flank this part and move towards Orichiw to meet its units. The 58th Combined Arms Army, which is stretched, in fact, here practically up to Bahete and Bilohirya, and from occupied Zeleny. If you look at the map, you can see that the enemy is trying to direct their strikes, well, practically to the area of Verkhnya Terasa. In fact, the enemy is trying to reach this line, which our defenders are currently holding. What for? Precisely to secure the flanks of another combined arms army, the 36th, which is currently operating further up in the Oleksandrivka and Pavlivka directions. It is precisely there that our armed forces are making some forward movements, and the junction of these 2 brigades is currently a bit dangerous for the enemy, as it is vulnerable to our troops. Again, on the eastern flank, the enemy is moving towards Orichiw on the sector. If you look, it's the Varvarivka direction, also here, Radisne. So their continuous strike is aimed, well, actually at this line of our defense. Also, small infantry groups are currently being spotted in the area of Novoselivka, Charivna, and Wozdvizhenska. We see that these are also, let's say, directions of strikes where the enemy is trying to concentrate their forces. However, these are currently small infantry groups that are being destroyed by our troops. In other words, the enemy hasn't been able to gain a foothold there, but attempts are already present, particularly in these areas. The gray zone has increased in the areas from Mirny, south of Dobrapilya. If you look at the map, you can see that right here and right here, the gray zone has increased, particularly in the area of Dobrapilya towards Ternuvate and from Solotke to Male Zaporischja. At the moment, the enemy's efforts are focused on moving towards the Orichiw defense hub. Specifically, if you look at the map, it's roughly this direction along the river towards Yegorivka, Omelnik, and Vasinivka in order to come in and cut off this Orichiw-Kamienoshwaka highway and create, well, certain difficulties for our troops who are holding the defense here. In general, the situation is as follows. If you look at the western part of the entire defense hub of Stepnohirsk, Minsk, Stepova, we see that the situation here has changed somewhat in favor of the armed forces of Ukraine. Our troops managed to push the enemy back in the area of Primorske along this road and force the enemy into the riverbed of the Kakovka Reservoir itself. There are also certain advances of our troops in the area of Plavny. The enemy is trying, let's say, to counterattack from Kamyanske, trying to straighten out these incursions by the armed forces of Ukraine with their flank. In particular, well, the directions of the strikes are planned towards Lukyanovske and Pavlivka. The situation in Stepnohirsk also remains quite, well, let's say, difficult, since the enemy still controls the southern part of the city. This is high-rise development. This effectively allows an enemy to deploy their drones and, let's say, establish a certain observation post in this area, which gives them a significant tactical advantage over our current position. The situation in the area of Mali-Sherbaki and Steppe also deserves attention, since the enemy is trying to move from Mali-Sherbaki towards the Novopavlivka area and the Novoandriivka area. There were certain advances by small enemy infantry groups noticed precisely in these areas. The enemy managed to approach Novoandriivka and Novopavlivka, however, they were unable to gain a foothold. The trend continues. The enemy, after all, is not giving up hope of entering Orichiw from the western part, essentially moving in the direction of those units of the 5th Combined Arms Army that are advancing from the east. Thus, they hope to close this ring somewhere around Tavriske, for example, or Novopavlivka, and create the kind of conditions for our armed forces where they will have to decide either to withdraw or, hold this defensive hub, which will be practically surrounded. That is precisely what the occupiers are counting on. The situation regarding Nestoryanka we see. If you look at the map, we see that the enemy is also trying to move from Nestoryanka, from Novofedorivka, from Novopokrovka towards Novodaniliska, and is using a good asphalt road for this. However, all the enemy's efforts that were spotted are being destroyed in this sector. The enemy is also moving along the railway, right into the area of Malatomachka. They didn't have any success with a frontal assault on Malatomachka. The village was cleared. A couple of units. Infantrymen were spotted in the area of the penal colony. However, this is an insignificant number, and right now our guys from the drone units are working on finding these infiltrators. The situation in Bilahiria and Bahate. Regarding Bilahiria, the enemy has made some advances. However, we cannot say that the village is already under the control of the occupiers. Part of the village, especially the northern and western parts, is controlled by the armed forces of Ukraine. In other words, the enemy is now trying to move towards Tokmachka on both sides of the river itself, trying to move from two directions, avoiding frontal assaults and avoiding the kind of losses that, in fact, they have already suffered. We have the opportunity to ask about the situation right in the Saporischschja region in the area of Molotokmachka and Bilohiria from the spokesperson of the 118th Mechanized Brigade, Dmytro Pelk, who is currently holding positions there. Greetings, Metro.
Greetings.
I'll remind our viewers about the fundraiser. The guys are raising funds for a vehicle. The code is on your screens. Please contribute. This is very important because vehicles right there are such a consumable that constantly needs replacing, as we know about the large number of enemy drones in the sky right in this sector of the front. Could you please tell me what forces the enemy is operating with in the area of the colony in Malatomachka after the armed forces of Ukraine were able to clear the settlement?
Well, in reality, we are not talking about any significant forces that could have an impact or even manage to dig in. These are isolated occupiers who managed to get there, and a very large portion of them are coming in just to surrender. The majority, or rather, not just the majority, but over 90% of such small assault groups are destroyed by us while still in the Tavria steppes, because these are tens of square kilometers of open steppe without any natural cover. After all, those small and already low shelter belts have been practically wiped out, and it's not really visible that there were ever trees there at some point. Only a small number of stumps remain. And this once again confirms that Tokmachka has been holding out for over 1,600 days now, and the enemy, again, to this day and even today, hasn't shown any presence of theirs. And likewise, they haven't shown the Russians' favorite method of capturing a settlement, that is, by engaging in some flag-waving stunts. Yeah, and all this.
Tell me, please, the enemy in the area of Bilohiria? They have actually managed to cross the Konka River, and now they are moving along both sides of this river, along the banks, on the flanks, towards Malatomachka. How dangerous is the enemy's movement for us along both banks of the Konka towards Malotokmachka? And are we, aware and taking measures? Do we see these movements?
Yeah, of course we see you. I wouldn't say that with the current development of drone technology, this poses any very great danger like it would if they didn't exist. It's just that all the other so-called millionaire roads are already sown with hundreds, even thousands of corpses. And it is precisely for now, this stretch of road is freer, but it will absolutely turn into the same kind of millionaire road, and there will be thousands of Russian assault troops will fall there, who will be trying to take Molotov-Machka. Of course, we are keeping a much closer eye on this specific sector, and as long as we continue to have good weather conditions, without any heavy rain, thick fog, or strong wind, everything remains under our control. Everything is currently covered by our fire support, and additional defensive measures, such as remote mining, are also being actively taken to ensure that the enemy simply does not get through.
Dmytro, the occupiers are deploying the 76th Air Assault Division in this sector. This is considered their elite. Has the nature of the combat and the enemy's tactics changed in the area of Molotov-Machka or in Bilohirya?
No, it hasn't changed at all. The enemy continues to utilize small, highly mobile assault groups in a very systematic fashion, just as they have been doing for some time now. At the same time, whenever they manage to accumulate a bit more strength and receive additional support from their neighbors, specifically referring to the use of dirt bikes and ATVs, they shift gears and adopt a completely different, more aggressive tactic, a high-speed, coordinated raid quickly rushing into a settlement where there is significantly more cover available than out in the open, exposed steppe. But even this tactic didn't bring the enemy any results, and we show this repeatedly. By the way, last time the enemy didn't even reach Molotov-Machka, and that's despite the fact that they deployed over 20 vehicles and about, more than a company of personnel. Yeah. The only thing is that the enemy has significantly increased the use of drones, as well as guided aerial bombs. That is happening.
Thank you, Dmytro. That was Dmytro Pelech, head of the communications department of the 118th Mechanized Brigade. I'll remind the viewers about the fundraiser. On your screens, please join in. The guys need our help. Mr. Alexander, could you please tell us, in your opinion, is the enemy not abandoning its intentions to reach the outskirts of Saporischschja? The fact that he currently, let's say, can't form a strike group, that's just a matter of time when the armies will unite, the 58th and, for example, the 5th there.
Well, of course he hasn't abandoned it. Nuh-uh. When a few days ago, even the State Duma, one of the representatives of the State Duma, officially stated that the goal of the war is to reach the western borders. That is, the complete occupation of Ukraine. So Saporischschja is one of the stages. Regarding the armies, let's start with Molotov-Machka first. Perhaps this will be important. This entrenchment of the Russists on the territory of the penal colony is quite dangerous because the colony itself represents a complex of buildings and structures that are autonomous, meaning there are buildings with quite thick walls, there are basement areas, and a fence that surrounds this entire complex. This isn't just a simple concrete fence. It's usually monolithic or brick, a quite thick fence. And the enemy accumulating there is only a matter of time, as we saw in Kupiansk. That is, over the course of a few, say, 3 or 4 months, due to infiltration, there will likely accumulate, let's say, up to about 100 Russians. And from there, operations against Molotov-Machka will be carried out. The brigade itself won't be able to handle this threat. This is where assets from higher command are needed, because this territory needs to be
Bond.
Absolutely. Guided aerial bombs, long-range artillery, even drones won't be able to handle this anymore. Here, it's necessary. Where our guided aerial bombs are, it's unclear, those cheap ones. But here, exclusively with aviation and artillery, we need to completely level this territory, not allowing the enemy to entrench themselves there and accumulate for the next push towards Tokmachka. Regarding the armies, the 58th Army, which is located closer to Saporischschja, We have said many times that its task is to reach the Saporischschja-Orichiw highway and from there create conditions for an attack on Zaporizhzhia. So the initial plan they tried during the winter-spring campaign to advance along the Dnieper and secure a foothold in the industrial zone, they failed at that. They were pushed back. And then the command of the 58th Army is once again looking for those gaps in order to complete the task of reaching the highway.
They are deploying east of
Steppe. They abandoned the strike on Zaporizhzhia and are heading
to the Komashuvaha highway.
Yeah.
Tell me, please, here's a question. I understand that this should have been asked to the head of the military-civilian administration. What should Zaporizhzhia do now, which is suffering from daily strikes by aerial bombs and FPV drones? The enemy's goal, obviously, is to turn Zaporizhzhia into the same kind of kill zone as Kherson, to depopulate the city and the region, and to create a burden of displaced persons on other regions and on Ukraine's economy.
Well, this isn't just a problem for Zaporizhzhia alone right now. As you said, Kherson, Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, the same thing. Sumy.
It's just that Zaporizhzhia is a city of 1 million people. There's industry there. People are now facing such constant strikes every day.
And the city is still functioning. This is a warrior city, let's say, where, among other things, our industry is still working to meet the needs of the front and to support the fight against the enemy in general. Yes, they will be ramped up, but this is not exclusively the problem of the head of the military-civil administration, whether city or regional. Why is it a military-civil administration? Because it is a complex of interactions specifically with the armed forces. That is, countering those attacks is the task of the armed forces. The task of the military-civil administration is to mitigate the consequences of these strikes and destruction, the construction of shelters and facilities, and the relocation of those same production facilities underground. The same schools that are still operating should have long since moved to safe places, that is, underground. Well, in the Kharkiv region, I know there is such a successful experience. With the help of our French friends, a school has been completely built that can conduct classes at any time. Well, specifically underground, meaning it is protected from those strikes. The military-civil administration should be doing the same thing in Zaporizhzhia, that is, ensuring maximum safety for the civilian population, for that working population that remains and works in Zaporizhzhia.